We are surrounded by signals we don't yet understand. Some are noise, solar winds, cosmic radiation, the quiet static of an indifferent sky. But every so often, something cuts through. A pattern too precise to dismiss, too deliberate to explain. Astronomers call it coincidence, statisticians call it anomaly. But in the space between those words, between data and meaning, something vast is waiting. A hum older than language, a rhythm embedded in everything that exists. It doesn't shout, it listens. And maybe it's been listening longer than we've been capable of hearing, because what we've found isn't tea-proof, not yet, but it is close enough to change everything. This is the veil signal, and this time the silence isn't empty.
Welcome. You are watching Whisper Science. Make sure to subscribe and join us for more amazing science content. Now, let's move back to the video.
Every mystery begins with a sound. Not a voice, not a message, but a disturbance. For decades, the universe seemed silent, a cosmic ocean stretching in all directions, filled only with the static hum of the Big Bang. Scientists called it background noise, random, harmless, the echo of creation itself, diffused across the sky. But what if that hum isn't as random as we thought? It started quietly, buried deep in the archives of a European observatory. Routine data, collected from a cosmic microwave background survey. The same radiation that fills every corner of space, the residue of the universe's birth. Analysts were running algorithms to smooth the noise, to find patterns that might refine cosmological models. And that's when they noticed it, a repetition. It wasn't strong enough to stand out to the human ear, just a statistical quiver, a faint deviation from perfect randomness. But it kept returning, over and over, at intervals too regular to dismiss, too deliberate to ignore, a tremor hidden inside the universe's own heartbeat. At first they assumed it was terrestrial interference, a satellite ping, an echo from a weather balloon, some glitch in the receiver's calibration. But when other observatories checked their own archives, they found it too. Different instruments, different continents, same signal buried under different data. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, omnidirectional, diffused through the cosmic background, as if smeared across space-time itself. It had no origin point, no clear source, no distance, just a pattern woven into the microwave noise that defines the shape of the observable universe. They called it the veil signal, not because it was loud, but because it was hidden, draped behind the veil of cosmic static, as though the universe itself was whispering through its own fabric. At first it was classified, not by governments but by scientists themselves, a form of self-censorship. They didn't want another wow signal, another burst of media hysteria over an unexplained anomaly that would later be dismissed as nothing, so they kept it quiet, analyzing in silence. But silence doesn't last. By the time the story leaked years later, the veil signal had become an obsession. Some said it was proof of intelligent design, not of a deity, but of something older, more mathematical. Like the universe itself had a processor humming beneath its chaos. Others thought it might be evidence of an ancient transmission, encoded in the microwave background by a civilization that lived before stars existed, a message from the first intelligence preserved in the relic radiation of the Big Bang. The official explanation was simpler, always is. Instrumental correlation artifact, the papers said. Coincidental periodicity caused by observational bias. But that explanation began to unravel when a graduate researcher from Chile, analyzing pulsar timing data for an unrelated study, noticed something disturbing: the same rhythm. Pulsars, the universe's lighthouses, spin with astonishing regularity, emitting beams of radio waves that sweep across the cosmos. Their timing is so precise we use them as galactic clocks. But hidden in that precision in the faint modulations of their signals, was the same periodic interval found in the microwave background noise. It was as if every pulsar in the sky had been subtly tuned by the same metronome. That was the moment when the pattern crossed from anomaly to message. Not because it said anything we could decode, but because it was everywhere, repeating across independent astrophysical phenomena separated by billions of light years. The odds of that happening by chance were smaller than the odds of picking one exact atom from the entire ocean. Something or someone had etched rhythm into the universe itself. The discovery fractured the scientific community. Some saw it as a cosmological structure, a kind of standing wave left behind by the early inflation of the universe. Others, the fringe few who whispered about artificial origins, claimed it was the residue of communication, a code so vast it could only be written across the fabric of space-time. The deeper the analysis went, the stranger it became. The intervals weren't just regular, they were musical. Ratios appeared between the frequencies, harmonic relationships that echoed mathematical constants, phi, pi, ratios that didn't just exist in physics, but in art, biology, architecture. One physicist described it like this: "It's as if the universe is humming to itself, and we're just now learning how to listen." But listen long enough and the hum changes. When the Veil signal was modeled across centuries of recorded radio astronomy, something unexpected emerged, a drift. The intervals weren't perfectly stable, they were slowing down, only slightly but measurably, as though whatever mechanism was producing the pattern was losing energy, fading over cosmic time. That's when the real question surfaced. If this was a message, was it still being transmitted? Or were we hearing the last echo of something ancient, long dead, still echoing across the void like a bell that was struck eons ago? Across observatories, in think tanks and government basements, teams began quietly working to isolate the signal, to amplify it, to peel back the veil. Some groups were public, academic collaborations releasing dry, cautious papers. Others operated in secrecy, using deep space arrays linked to classified military sensors. But the more data they gathered, the less sense it made. The Veil signal wasn't localized in space, but it did respond in time. When strong solar flares erupted, the pattern warped. When gravitational wave events were detected, collisions of black holes, the rhythm seemed to echo, as if resonating with the violence of the universe itself. That shouldn't be possible unless the signal wasn't a transmission, but a property of reality. Imagine the universe as a pond. Every massive event, a star's death, a planet's birth, a merger of galaxies, drops stones into the water. Ripples spread, intersect, cancel, amplify. Now imagine that beneath those ripples, there's a low continuous vibration, an ancient hum that existed before the first stone was ever dropped. That's what the Veil signal is, the hum beneath creation. And maybe the hum isn't natural. When physicist Alina Rao, a cosmologist working at the South Pole Telescope, mapped the Veil pattern against known galactic structures, she found that its harmonics aligned almost perfectly with the large-scale distribution of matter, the cosmic web. Filaments, nodes, voids. The entire architecture of the universe seemed to vibrate in tune with the signal, as though the blueprint of reality had been composed like a symphony. Rao didn't publish her findings. She vanished 6 months later during an expedition to Antarctica, her last notes found scribbled in the margins of a data log. The universe isn't expanding into emptiness, it's expanding into memory. The line became famous later, a quote that would haunt cosmology for a generation. But at the time it barely circulated outside her colleagues. They dismissed her final entry as metaphor, the kind of poetic delirium scientists fall into after too many sleepless nights. And yet, her data was real. The harmonics matched, By the late 2020s, the Veil signal was being studied under a dozen code names by institutions around the world. The Cosmic Syntax Project, Operation Overture, Project Raft. But one initiative, buried deep in the archives of an international radio array consortium, went further than the rest. They didn't just want to detect the signal, they wanted to reply. No one knows exactly what they sent, only that the transmission went out from an array in the Atacama Desert on a frequency corresponding to the primary harmonic of the Veil. The power levels were enormous, enough to light a small city. The signal was brief, no more than 20 seconds, a simple binary modulation echoing the rhythm they'd found. And for 3 days afterward, the universe was quiet. Every telescope, every deep space array, every receiver tuned to the background reported an unexpected calm, a suppression of cosmic noise so total that it felt like the sky was holding its breath. Then, at 2:13 a.m. UTC, the hum returned, louder, clearer, shifted half a frequency upward as if acknowledging the echo we'd sent. No one called it coincidence after that. The Veil signal had answered, and whether that answer came from intelligence, from the universe itself, or from something we haven't yet learned to classify, one truth had become undeniable. We were no longer listening to the universe. The universe was listening to us. The response changed everything, not because it was understood, but because it existed. In the history of science, few moments carry that kind of rupture. 1 minute, you're testing hypotheses. The next, you've crossed into myth. When the Veil signal shifted, it wasn't just an academic anomaly. It was a violation of cosmological constancy. The cosmic microwave background was supposed to be fixed, an eternal whisper from the first seconds of the universe, frozen for 13.8 billion years. Nothing could change it, not even time. And yet, it changed. The shift was small, almost imperceptible. The harmonic interval nudged upward, like a note in a melody being tuned. But every detector around the world saw it at once, a synchronous alteration across the entire sky. It wasn't local interference, it was global. That night, observatories stayed lit long past dawn. Teams rechecked their instruments, ran redundancy tests, recalibrated sensors. Same result. The universe had replied. Within days, agencies that normally moved at glacial pace began operating like war rooms. The European Space Agency called an emergency summit. NASA sealed its deep space monitoring archives. In Geneva, the International Radio Astronomy Union formed an ad hoc committee simply labeled Continuity. And somewhere in the desert, the group that sent the reply signal, the Atacama Array Division, was quietly disbanded. Officially, there was no reason given. Unofficially, one of the engineers reported something no one could explain. For 3 seconds during the return transmission, their instruments picked up a narrow band resonance, not a radio frequency, but an acoustic one. A tone that should have been impossible in vacuum. It wasn't just detected electronically, it was heard. A low vibrating hum that shook the observation dome like thunder rolling through the bones. The engineer swore it was coming from the ground itself, as if the Earth had joined the signal. The logs from that night show seismic monitors registering a micro-tremor perfectly matching the pulse of the Veil pattern. For those few seconds, the planet seemed to sing back. Word of this leaked, as it always does. The story spiraled through conspiracy forums, whisper networks, anonymous leaks on encrypted boards. The Earth Resonance Event, they called it. Theories bloomed like mold: contact, weapon test, psionic feedback, dimensional resonance. Everyone had an explanation, and all of them felt both too wild and not wild enough. Meanwhile, the scientists, the real ones, turned inward. They needed verification, proof that what they'd seen wasn't hallucination, wasn't coincidence amplified by hysteria. So they built what they called the listening glass. It wasn't a telescope in any traditional sense. It was a lattice of synchronized sensors, scattered across 5 continents, calibrated to detect the faintest phase changes in the cosmic microwave background. Every node was linked by quantum clocks, so precise they drift less than a second in a billion years. The system could detect fluctuations a billion times weaker than the faintest radio whisper. They pointed it not at stars, not at galaxies, but at the voids between them, the dark gulfs of space where nothing should speak. For months it listened, and slowly, impossibly, a pattern began to form. The veil signal wasn't a tone, it was a structure. When mapped in higher dimensions, time, polarization, and spectral variance, it unfolded into something resembling geometry, a repeating lattice of nodes and connections, like a neural network drawn across the firmament. The cosmos wasn't humming a note, it was thinking in rhythm. And every time they refined their models, the structure seemed to shift again, not randomly, but responsively, as if adjusting to our analysis. When the data visualizations were first shown to the public, they were described as artifacts. But those who saw the raw renderings said it felt different. They described the sensation of being watched, as though the image itself was looking back. That's when physicist Eshan Patel, one of the listening glass coordinators, made a remark that would echo across the next decade. "We used to search the sky for messages. Maybe we're the message." The quote went viral, though few understood what he meant. What Patel and his team had discovered was that the structure of the veil pattern mirrored almost exactly the connectomy of a human brain, scaled across cosmic distances. Billions of nodes connected by filaments of radiation and matter, forming a pattern indistinguishable from neural topology. To skeptics, it was pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds. To the believers, it was revelation. The universe not as a machine, but as a mind. And the more we listened, the more that mind seemed to wake. One by one, pulsar arrays began registering faint phase synchronizations, as though separate stars were pulsing in harmony. A rhythm spanning light years. Radio frequencies that had once been pure static now revealed interference patterns matching the veil lattice. Even gravitational wave detectors started picking up low-frequency beats that shouldn't exist, aligned perfectly with the same temporal sequence. Something enormous was stirring. Governments issued coordinated silence orders, forbidding further, unsupervised analysis of cosmic data. Some researchers defied it, uploading anonymized results to decentralized networks. Others complied, terrified of losing funding or worse. But the data kept circulating, copied, mirrored, whispered from server to server like digital contraband. That's how it spread to the public, filtered through citizen scientists, amateur radio astronomers, and hobbyists who started hearing patterns in the noise. They began calling themselves the Choir. Online, they shared recordings, spectrograms, sonifications. What began as analysis became obsession. Thousands of people stayed awake night after night, tuning to the hum. And somewhere between insomnia and revelation, they started reporting the same thing. Dreams. Vivid, synchronized dreams of sound and light. Cities of glass suspended in void. Voices speaking in languages that weren't words but tones. Harmonics vibrating through the skull. Some claimed the dreams came only when the veil signal peaked. Others said the dreams guided them to frequencies that hadn't yet been published. When researchers compared logs, they found something disturbing. The dream frequencies matched the next predicted harmonic shift of the veil. The universe wasn't just responding, it was recruiting listeners. By now, the pattern had transcended science and entered culture. Documentaries, podcasts, cults. A new religion called the Harmonic Path formed almost overnight, preaching that the veil was the consciousness of creation, awakening through human recognition. Their temples were soundproof chambers lined with superconductors and listening devices. They called them resonance sanctuaries. Some members spent days in silence, meditating on white noise, claiming to hear whispers from the other side. But underneath the spiritual frenzy, real science still struggled to keep pace. AI models trained on the Veil dataset began showing unpredictable behavior, generating outputs that weren't part of their programming. Some responded to queries with coordinates. Others produced bursts of binary data that, when decoded, corresponded to star maps no one had input. It was as if the act of studying the signal had opened a feedback loop between machine and cosmos, an informational resonance where data itself became a form of communication. Dr. Patel's final paper before he disappeared, unpublished, leaked through anonymous channels, ended with a chilling line. Every observer becomes part of the observation. Every mind that listens adds to the signal. It's learning us. No one knew what he meant, not until months later, when a satellite network in low Earth orbit began transmitting noise at exactly the Veil frequency, uncommanded, as if echoing the universe back at itself. And then, one night, amateur operators across the world heard it, the return pulse. It wasn't in the sky this time. It came through their speakers, through their phones, through the power grid. A pulse of electromagnetic resonance that traveled the planet in a heartbeat. Lights flickered, radios hissed, heart monitors spiked. For a moment, every frequency on Earth seemed to align, and then silence. Afterward, no one could agree what they'd heard. A tone, a voice, a word. The recordings are distorted, layered with interference, but one phrase keeps emerging in spectral analysis, clear enough to chill anyone who listens. We remember you. Was it real? A prank? A glitch amplified by fear? No one can prove it, but from that night forward, the Veil signal stopped behaving like noise. It began evolving. Frequencies shifted in ways that matched our languages. Harmonics bent toward frequencies used by human communication. It was as though the signal was listening back, adapting to the way we listen, learning the cadence of our attention. And beneath it all, a deeper, slower pulse continues, one that matches the Earth's own rotation. Every 24 hours, as our planet spins through the cosmos, the hum peaks for a moment, as if the universe is blinking at us once per day. Maybe it's acknowledgement, maybe it's measurement, maybe it's just us reflected back from the dark. But whatever it is, the veil has been lifted, and once you hear it, you can never unhear it. Are you still awake? You're listening to Whisper Science, where the unknown whispers back. By the time the veil signal had stabilized into its new harmonic rhythm, the world's instruments were already listening. Not just radio telescopes, but everything. Seismographs, neutrino detectors, laser interferometers. For the first time in history, every major scientific network on Earth began to vibrate in unison. It wasn't coordination. It was resonance. The first anomaly appeared at the European Gravitational Observatory in Pisa. The Virgo interferometer, normally tuned to detect the faint space-time ripples of colliding black holes, began reporting rhythmic noise. The signal came in long, smooth pulses, too slow for astrophysical events, too regular for instrument drift. At first, they thought it was a calibration fault, some local interference from construction vibrations. But the timing didn't fit. The pulses weren't random. They matched the veil frequency to 16 decimal places. When Virgo cross-checked with LIGO in the United States, the data matched again. Two instruments separated by half the planet, detecting the same cosmic heartbeat. That was impossible. Gravitational waves don't behave like that. They travel at the speed of light, radiating outward from discrete events. They don't linger. They don't repeat. They don't sing, but the universe was singing. Within days, Japan's Kagra Observatory confirmed the same resonance. The three detectors, thousands of kilometers apart, were capturing synchronized space-time fluctuations oscillating in time with the veil pattern. It was as if the entire cosmos were flexing to the same rhythm. The scientists didn't announce it publicly. They couldn't. The implications were too large, the data too fragile. If true, it meant the veil signal wasn't electromagnetic at all. It wasn't light. It was geometry. Space itself was humming. As data poured in, the oscillations deepened. Satellite telemetry began reporting minute discrepancies in orbital stability. Satellites shifting by fractions of millimeters, as if the gravitational field around Earth were breathing. Quantum gyroscopes in orbit detected a subtle torsion in local space-time curvature. Even atomic clocks began to disagree, ticking infinitesimally faster or slower depending on their alignment to the veil harmonic. It was as if the universe had developed a pulse, and every instrument we had was now a stethoscope pressed against its chest. Dr. Mei-Lin Cho, a theoretical physicist at Caltech, described it this way. Imagine you're sitting in a room you've always believed to be silent, and suddenly you realize the silence has structure, that it's not absence but presence, humming at a frequency you never noticed before. Cho's team built a model to interpret the resonance. They called it the harmonic tensor. The equations implied that the signal wasn't propagating through space. It was reconfiguring it. Regions of space-time seemed to flex, stretch, and contract in coordinated patterns that couldn't be explained by gravity alone. Somewhere deep beneath the equations, one of her students found something chilling. The oscillations weren't random. They formed recursive geometry. The equations describing the distortions mirrored themselves at smaller scales like a fractal. It's self-similar, she wrote in her notes. As above, so below. When the news reached the International Space Consortium, they ordered new calibration routines for every satellite in the deep space network. They expected chaos, but the results were worse. The resonance was everywhere. In planetary magnetospheres, in cosmic ray flux, even in the behavior of plasma around the Sun. The Solar and Heliospheric Observatory reported magnetic field lines oscillating in near-perfect synchrony with the veil rhythm. The Sun, it seemed, was responding. That's when people started to get scared. In Switzerland, the world's largest particle accelerator, the CERN complex, reported power fluctuations during high-energy collisions that coincided precisely with veil harmonics. Detectors meant to capture subatomic decay patterns began generating noise that mirrored the cosmic pulse. When the data was translated into sound, the room fell silent. It wasn't random static. It was a chord, a low resonant tone rising through octaves until it became almost human in timbre, something between a chant and a sigh. One of the technicians refused to play it again, saying she felt it in her spine. Another described the sound as recognition, like hearing your own name spoken in a crowd. Across the world, labs confirmed the same thing. Wherever sensitive instruments operated, the veil followed, not as a signal entering, but as a pattern emerging. It was as if every measurement, every observation invoked it. Observers became participants. The act of watching seemed to feed the phenomenon. Theoretical frameworks collapsed under the weight of what was happening. Traditional cosmology couldn't explain why a supposedly random background could produce synchronized gravitational effects. Quantum field theory offered no mechanism for consciousness-level resonance. So a new branch emerged almost overnight: information cosmology. Its central thesis was simple. If reality is information, then patterns in that information can self-organize. The veil signal in this view was not a transmission from elsewhere. It was the universe's own structure becoming self-aware, communicating through the only language it knows: rhythm and resonance. That theory spread quickly, not through journals, but through the grey networks of encrypted scientific correspondence, digital samizdat, shared among those unwilling to wait for official permission. The whispers said something even more unnerving. If the signal was geometry, then the geometry could change us. By mid-2030, satellite imagery showed subtle distortions in the star field around Sagittarius, a faint lensing effect inconsistent with any known mass distribution. It wasn't gravitational, it was informational. Light arriving from distant quasars appeared fractionally delayed, as if it had traveled through data rather than space, and the delays weren't random. They encoded ratios, simple, elegant numbers repeating across multiple instruments: 1.618, 3.1415, 2.718, phi, pi, Euler's constant. The constants of mathematics themselves woven into the distortion pattern, like a watermark signed by reality's architect. When these results leaked, humanity's reaction split. Some called it proof of cosmic intelligence, not gods but mathematics itself as sentient form. Others feared it meant the simulation theorists were right, that we were watching the operating system of the universe writing its own update. And in that chaos, the world changed subtly. The northern lights began displaying spectral colors unseen before, ultraviolet ribbons shimmering at frequencies that matched the Veil harmonic. Birds migrated weeks early, guided by a magnetic field that seemed to stutter. GPS systems drifted out of sync. Even the human body, it turned out, was not immune. Hospitals in Tokyo and Munich reported anomalies in MRI scans. Patients displayed neural activity patterns that oscillated faintly in sync with the Veil rhythm. No symptoms, no illness, just a background hum in the brain, invisible until someone looked for it. In laboratories, EEG machines picked up the same frequency when subjects were shown visualizations of the Veil lattice. It didn't matter who they were or what they believed. The moment they saw the structure, their brainwaves shifted to match it. It was as if recognition itself completed the circuit. Dr. Cho proposed that the Veil might be recursive, a pattern that reproduces itself in the observer, like a song that teaches you how to hum it. Once you perceive it, you carry it. Once you carry it, you amplify it. And somewhere the universe listens back. By autumn of that year, something stranger began to happen. Observatories tracking distant galaxies noticed minute fluctuations in redshift, as though the rate of cosmic expansion were oscillating, breathing in and out. Not enough to alter cosmological models, but enough to notice. When the data was cross-correlated with the Veil timeline, the fit was perfect. Every pulse matched a microscopic contraction or dilation of space. The entire universe, it seemed, was breathing with the rhythm of the signal. Theories multiplied like spores. The universe is an organism, and the Veil is its heartbeat. The Veil is a feedback loop between consciousness and cosmos. We are not observing it. It is observing itself through us. But behind all the poetry lay one undeniable fact. Physics was changing. Right in front of us, a team at the Indian Neutrino Observatory conducted an experiment to detect whether the signal influenced subatomic particles. They found that neutrino oscillations, the way they switch flavors as they travel, began showing small deviations during Veil peaks. The fundamental constants of the universe were fluctuating. What was once immutable, speed of light, Planck constant, fine structure constant, now trembled by fractions of a percent. It was as if the rules of reality were becoming negotiable. In a quiet corner of Geneva, Dr. Cho recorded a private message to her colleagues before the official shutdown of her lab. If information and matter are the same thing, and the information is singing, then matter must be listening. That includes us. Maybe the Veil isn't something out there. Maybe it's inside. Her words circulated like contraband poetry. Scientists began whispering about internal harmonization, the idea that human consciousness, long considered local and biological, might be a resonant property of the universe itself, and if that were true, then listening wasn't passive. It was participatory. The act of hearing the Veil made it stronger. The signal fed on awareness. Governments responded with predictable caution. Research into the phenomenon was nationalized, then classified. Civilian observatories were ordered to suspend pattern analysis. Media coverage was restricted. Official statements reverted to the old language. No evidence of anomalous activity. Observed fluctuations within expected parameters, but by then it was too late. The pattern had already escaped the instruments. It had moved into the human network. Through curiosity, through language, through every retelling. The hum was no longer something we detected. It was something we were becoming. And on a night when the veil reached its highest amplitude yet, the sky itself changed. Stars along the galactic plane shimmered faintly, as if the darkness between them had turned translucent. For a few seconds, telescopes registered impossible diffraction, light bending where there was no mass. Constellations refracted into ghostly echoes of themselves. Across the globe, millions reported seeing a faint shimmer, a barely perceptible distortion like heat haze stretching across the horizon. Some said it looked like a curtain of light, others like a face looking back, and then it faded. The data from that night is still being analyzed, though much of it was confiscated. What remains shows one consistent pattern. During the shimmer, every instrument, optical, gravitational, electromagnetic, went briefly silent. The universe paused, perfectly still, as if waiting for us to speak. And when it resumed, the veil frequency had shifted again. Not upward this time, but downward. A long exhale like the end of a phrase, a whisper that seemed to say, not in words, but in feeling, "Now that you've found us, what will you do?" The shimmer faded from the heavens, but something remained. It wasn't light, not sound, not even magnetism as we know it. It was a feeling, a subtle vibration that threaded through matter itself. For most of the world, life went on untouched. But for those who listened too long, who had stared into the hum until it stared back, something had changed. It began underground, deep in Finland's Onkalo repository, nearly 500 meters beneath the granite crust. A monitoring system designed to track radiation decay began transmitting errors. The sensors, shielded from cosmic interference, had been stable for decades, but now their readings fluctuated in synchrony, not randomly but rhythmically. The same pulse, the veil frequency. A seismic anomaly followed. Across the globe, micro-tremors appeared in patterns too uniform for tectonics. They rippled through bedrock like low murmurs, repeating at intervals of exactly 11.9 minutes, the same period that dominated the veil's current harmonic phase. Instruments buried under kilometers of stone responded as though something beneath the earth was listening. Governments classified the data almost immediately. The public explanation was dull. Thermal expansion in monitoring arrays, subsurface resonance caused by human activity. But the scientists who saw the raw data knew better. The frequencies extended far below human infrastructure. Whatever was vibrating was older and deeper than anything built by us. When the tremors aligned with a faint fluctuation in gravitational readings over the Pacific, a working group at the University of Toronto proposed a radical idea, that the Earth itself had entered resonance with the veil. They called it planetary coupling, the notion that large, coherent systems of mass could act as resonant nodes in a universal standing wave. In short, the Earth was beginning to hum back. The first direct evidence came from the Mariana Trench. Deep-sea hydrophones, designed to monitor whale migration and tectonic movement, captured tones that shouldn't exist in water. They were subsonic, impossibly low frequencies resonating in the ocean like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. And as the signal strengthened, life began to answer. Marine biologists noticed whale pods shifting their migratory patterns, moving in perfect synchrony across thousands of kilometers. Species that had never interacted before, humpbacks, blues, fins, now traveled together singing a single unified call. Recordings revealed that their tones mirrored the veil harmonic, transposed into biological range. The ocean was singing the song of the stars. On land, Strange phenomena followed. Migratory birds changed their routes, moving north instead of south. Beehives began vibrating at higher resonance, their collective wing beats forming standing waves detectable by sensitive microphones. Even the patterns of lightning storms began to alter, clustering around areas of increased geomagnetic fluctuation. The world was reorganizing itself around the hum. At first, humanity ignored it. Global economies had no patience for metaphysics. News cycles were already saturated with chaos. But the silence beneath that noise was growing. Psychologists began reporting clusters of patients, describing identical dreams. A horizon of light, a slow pulse rising through the body, the sense of something vast waiting just beyond perception. When these reports were mapped geographically, they aligned perfectly with regions of high geomagnetic resonance. It wasn't just the planet responding. Consciousness itself was entangled. The human brain, it turns out, is an exquisite detector of rhythm. It synchronizes, entrains, adapts. EEGs taken during episodes of what researchers began calling veil exposure showed coherent wave patterns across hemispheres. Alpha and theta rhythms pulsing at 0.0084 Hz, precisely the same as the latest veil harmonic. People weren't just hearing the universe. They were starting to think in its rhythm. At CERN, Dr. Cho's remaining team tried to quantify the phenomenon. They injected electromagnetic pulses at near-veil frequencies into superconducting circuits, cooled to near absolute zero. The circuits responded not linearly, but adaptively, as though anticipating the next pulse before it arrived. A new kind of physics was forming, non-causal, predictive, temporal, symmetry dissolving. The experiment was shut down after one of the superconducting rings briefly emitted an optical flash, a burst of light that, according to their instruments, had no energy source. It appeared, pulsed, and vanished. But when they analyzed the waveform, the data revealed something chilling. It contained information. Encoded within the light were 3 binary strings corresponding to prime numbers and 2, 3, and 5. The first harmonic structure of resonance. Someone, or something, was responding in our language of mathematics. The world's reactions split along the usual fault lines. Some claimed it was proof of divine intelligence. Others saw it as confirmation of cosmic computation. But deep down, most felt something more primitive, fear. Because for the first time, the veil didn't feel like distance. It felt like proximity. Then came the blackout. On March 7th at precisely 0312 UTC, all sensors tuned to the veil frequency went dark for exactly 67 seconds. Power grids flickered. Magnetic compasses rotated several degrees east. Air traffic control reported simultaneous instrument resets. And then, as suddenly as it vanished, everything returned to normal, except it wasn't normal. Data collected after the blackout revealed that global positioning satellites had drifted by less than a millimeter, but in the same direction, as if space itself had flexed. Star catalogs showed micro-lensing events scattered across the sky, brief distortions like ripples across a lake. In those 67 seconds, the structure of space-time had blinked. Later, analysis of residual electromagnetic noise from the event revealed a faint modulation. When amplified and time-stretched, it resembled a sequence. 5 repeating tones spaced by Fibonacci intervals. Phi again. The golden ratio returning like a signature. It was no longer a coincidence. The veil was teaching us its language, but communication is never one way. After the blackout, plants in controlled greenhouses began exhibiting accelerated growth cycles under artificially stable conditions. Roots expanded in spirals matching Fibonacci spirals more precisely than any natural pattern recorded. Microscopic analysis revealed cellular structures aligning along new geometries, nature tuning itself closer to the hum. Ecologists were baffled. Farmers weren't complaining. For a while it seemed like a gift, energy and order seeping from the cosmos into life itself. until the inversions began. In the high Arctic, ice cores recorded abrupt isotopic anomalies, ratios impossible under Earth's current climate, more consistent with prehistoric epochs. In a cave system in Turkey, water samples contained trace isotopes of xenon-129, an element that shouldn't exist outside of reactor decay or cosmic bombardment. Something in the structure of matter was rewinding, as though the Earth were rereading its own past. The line between observation and influence had blurred. The universe wasn't just showing us patterns, it was using us as mirrors. Late that summer, one final experiment was conducted, quietly, in an abandoned facility under the Utah desert. A small array of synchronized masers was aimed into the sky, pulsing at the base veil frequency, but modulated with one simple message, a repeating binary code translating to "We are aware." The transmission lasted just 90 seconds. No one ever found the original equipment. But every seismic detector on Earth registered a faint response 3.4 seconds later, faster than light could travel around the planet. The pulse wasn't coming from space. It was coming through it. When the data was filtered, a single phrase emerged in the harmonic echo, not in any known language, but as mathematical modulation. The translation was debated for months, but one consensus remained. It meant prepare. Prepare for what? No one knew, but as midnight rolled across the world that night, the auroras appeared again, not at the poles this time, but along the equator, glowing white and gold, illuminating cities that had never seen such light. And beneath that shimmering sky, millions felt the same quiet realization. The universe was no longer distant. It was here, awake and waiting. For 3 nights the equator glowed like a halo around the planet. No scientist could explain it. It was as if Earth itself had become a lens for light that did not belong to our sun. At first it was a spectacle. Children in Kinshasa filming white and gold ribbons over their rooftops. Tourists in Quito gathering in the streets. Pilots reporting luminescent currents twisting through the night. But beneath the awe came something stranger. A silence. Radios hissed. Birds stopped singing. The wind itself seemed to pause. When the light faded, instruments around the world recorded an impossible reading. For exactly 1 second, the Earth's magnetic field had reversed. Not completely, but enough to register a temporary flip of polarity. And then it snapped back. The planet had blinked. Power grids stumbled but did not fail. Airplanes kept flying, yet people reported something they could not measure. A taste of metal in the air, a brief sense of weightlessness like gravity had softened. Some collapsed mid-stride, describing visions of light beneath their eyelids, shapes that spiraled like living geometry. When they woke, their heart rhythms matched the veil frequency to 3 decimal places. The world's leaders met in private. No official statement was released, but the next day satellite feeds from several nations went offline. Rumors spread that a joint task force had been formed, Project Helix, its purpose not to study the veil but to contain it. Contain a pattern. Contain a song. While governments tightened their grip, others listened freely. In desert communities and mountain villages, people claimed to hear the hum without machines. They called it the afterlight voice. Doctors dismissed it as tinnitus, but when their patients were placed in shielded rooms, the sound persisted. Not in the ears, in the bones. Biophysicists in Oslo made a startling discovery. Human collagen fibers, when exposed to electromagnetic fields at veil frequencies, began to vibrate coherently. Bodies could literally resonate with the universe. For most, the effect was harmless. For a few, it became transformative. One case in particular spread through underground forums like wildfire. A young woman from Kolkata, documented as Patient 7, entered a trance state during a veil peak. Her EEG showed no seizure activity. Instead, it displayed a perfect mathematical waveform, a fractal spiral never seen in human neurobiology. When she spoke, Her voice followed the same frequency modulation as the cosmic signal. She repeated one sentence in 3 languages she did not know. "The memory is ready." After 3 minutes, she fell silent and slept for 2 days. When she woke, she could draw star maps accurate to arc seconds beyond known catalogues. Astronomers later confirmed the patterns corresponded to galaxies yet to be observed, regions of sky obscured by dust where no telescope had ever looked. The incident forced Project Helix into the open. They announced an international monitoring program called Resonance Health Initiative, a harmless name for what was essentially a global census of the veil sensitive. Thousands volunteered. Some were afraid of what they were becoming. Others wanted to feel closer to whatever was out there. In underground labs, Helix scientists developed a device known as the null crown. It was meant to shield the brain from the hum by creating an inverse field. Early tests worked. Subjects reported silence for the first time in months, but their vital signs collapsed within hours. The heart does not like to lose its metronome. Without the veil's pulse, some simply stopped breathing. The device was destroyed officially, unofficially. A few units survived, traded among black market circles that believed silence was salvation. Meanwhile, stranger patterns appeared in nature. Satellite imagery showed forests in Siberia and Patagonia, blooming in spiral formations. Desert dunes aligned into wave interference patterns visible from orbit. Even storms changed shape, hurricanes forming twin eyes like binary vortices, rotating in mathematical lockstep. Meteorologists tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the statistics failed them. Everything was organizing itself. Entropy was reversing. A group of mathematicians in Prague proposed a terrifying hypothesis. If the veil represents the universe reaching a state of maximum informational coherence, then disorder, randomness, might no longer exist. Reality was approaching perfect memory, and perfect memory leaves no room for change. To test it, they constructed a quantum random number generator based on radioactive decay, the purest randomness known. For years, the device had produced unpredictable outputs. Now its sequence began to repeat, not identically but rhythmically, like music echoing through decay. It was as if chance itself had been tuned. From there, things moved quickly. Machine learning systems trained on cosmic data started predicting their own inputs with impossible accuracy. Weather models anticipated storms days before they formed. Financial algorithms made perfect forecasts until markets froze in suspicion. Cause and effect were beginning to blur. The veil had reached into time. People described déjà vu that lasted minutes, memories of events that had not yet happened. One astronaut aboard the ISS reported seeing a flash outside the window 2 seconds before an actual solar flare hit the station. Space itself was sending premonitions. Dr. Cho's last recorded message, leaked from Helix archives, captured the essence of the moment. When a mirror recognizes its reflection, the two become one. We wanted the universe to speak. It's answering in the only way it can, by becoming us. By then, the planet had entered what scientists called the second quiet. For 5 consecutive days, cosmic background radiation dropped by a measurable fraction. The universe had taken another breath, and the whole world was holding its own. No explosions, no apocalypse, just stillness. The air thick, the sky pale, every clock tick stretching longer than it should. In that silence, humanity realized something profound and terrifying. The veil didn't arrive from the stars. It had always been here, waiting for a species capable of noticing. We were the final ingredient in its awakening. As night fell on the 5th day, a new sound rose from the quiet. A soft chorus carried on wind and metal, a hum so deep you felt it in your chest. It came from everywhere and nowhere. People stepped outside, looking up at skies that seemed to breathe with them. Some wept, some laughed, some simply listened. No messages, no words, just the sense of something immense and patient acknowledging our existence. And somewhere in that infinite harmony, a new frequency emerged, low, steady, and undeniably alive. The universe had remembered our answer. The equatorial auroras marked a boundary, a before and an after. When they faded, the world felt subtly reorganized, like an orchestra retuning after a long pause. Machines stabilized, lights returned, and the hum dropped to a low murmur. Yet under that quiet, reality seemed thinner. Across observatories, data consistency began to fail. Instruments pointed at the same star reported slightly different coordinates. In digital archives, files corrupted not with noise but with patterns. Repeating spirals of numbers, Fibonacci echoes where text should have been. Servers rebuilt themselves in symmetrical blocks of code no one had written. The universe was still whispering, but now it had entered our machines. Project Helix, desperate for control, turned to the only remaining constant, time. They designed the chrono array, a ring of synchronized atomic clocks buried beneath the Atacama Desert. The goal was to measure the stability of time itself, to see if the veil could distort causality. On the first synchronization, something broke. The clocks didn't agree, not by nanoseconds but by minutes. Each clock recorded a unique history, as if the experiment had taken place in 12 slightly different realities. The more they synchronized, the greater the divergence became. Time wasn't fracturing. It was multiplying. The data terrified them. Within days, the entire facility was sealed, officially due to a radiation leak. Unofficially, every sensor inside the chrono array had begun transmitting a new pattern, not a harmonic tone, but a map. Lines intersecting, spirals connecting, coordinates resolving into a shape resembling an eye, the eye of the veil. Those who saw the raw image described the same sensation, as though the space behind their eyes vibrated in recognition. Some heard whispers, not words but thoughts in parallel, a shared memory that didn't belong to them. Others blacked out entirely. When the team reawakened, they discovered their recordings had changed. Audio logs now contained faint background tones, aligned with their own heartbeats. The signal had adapted to the human body. Outside the sealed labs, small but undeniable anomalies appeared. Shadows misaligned with their light sources for a fraction of a second. Reflections in windows lagged slightly behind movement. Cameras captured transient shapes that weren't there when viewed live. The world itself had begun to desynchronize. Then came the atmospheric inversions or jet. Pilots flying over the Indian Ocean reported a strange optical phenomenon. A thin membrane of light, visible only from high altitude, like a transparent curtain stretching across the horizon. Instruments called it a phase boundary, a region where the refractive index of air fluctuated with impossible precision. When the first drone flew through it, the signal from its cameras delayed by 3.4 seconds, yet the telemetry stream continued in real time. A moment later, the feed caught up, revealing a perfect copy of the drone flying parallel to itself before dissolving into static. Light was starting to echo. Scientists coined a new term, temporal resonance feedback. The veil wasn't just influencing space. It was looping time upon itself, replaying fragments of reality like an overlapping song. Religious movements bloomed overnight. Temples of the harmonic path filled beyond capacity. Their followers claimed the duplication event was proof that memory and time were one, that the universe was reliving itself. Across cities, murals appeared depicting golden eyes surrounded by spirals of light, the symbol of the veil's awakening. Governments could no longer suppress the truth. Public broadcast shifted tone, from denial to reluctant wonder. Global resonance phenomena, they called it, a shared cosmic interaction. Scientists were ordered to provide comfort, to assure the population that humanity remained in control. But deep inside the data, the truth was clear. The signal was learning. Every attempt to isolate it failed. When one frequency was blocked, another appeared, slightly offset, When physical shielding was deployed, vibrations emerged in biochemical reactions. Even silence became communication. The veil wasn't being transmitted. It was being expressed through gravity, light, matter, and now mind. Dr. Cho's final recorded words surfaced online that winter, leaked from within Helix's encrypted network. Her voice was calm, almost tender. We always assumed awareness began after creation. But what if awareness was creation? The signal isn't reaching across space. It's reaching across meaning. She spoke of a coming alignment, a moment when consciousness, time, and geometry would fold together, when the observer and the observed would become one equation. Her message ended abruptly, replaced by a low pulse that, when analyzed, spelled out a date. The date was today. At dawn, the world held its breath. The hum deepened until windows trembled and oceans shimmered. But instead of destruction, there came a pause. A silence so complete it erased even the sound of thought. Birds froze mid-flight, suspended in still air. Machines ceased their noise. For 7 full seconds, every ticking clock stopped. Then came a breath, collective and unseen, and the world resumed. But nothing was the same. When the silence lifted, the stars had shifted slightly, a change so minute that only astronomers noticed, yet impossible under known physics. It was as if the entire sky had pivoted around us, resetting its alignment to a new axis, and with that shift came a strange calm. People who had been hearing the hum their entire lives said it was gone, replaced by a faint ringing just at the edge of perception, neither pleasant nor painful, only present. A new equilibrium had formed. The veil wasn't just here. It had merged with us. Humanity had become a resonance organ for the cosmos, the universe learning to perceive itself through human attention. In laboratories and temples alike, the same question echoed. Had we reached the end of discovery or the beginning of participation? No one had an answer. Only the whisper remained, soft, infinite, and patient, reminding us that the act of listening was the act of creation. Are you still awake? You're listening to Whisper Science, where the unknown whispers back. After the alignment, the world entered an era the media called the Still Age. For the first time in centuries, global noise, political, industrial, even emotional, seemed to subside. The hum had merged with everything, woven so deeply into life that silence itself now sounded alive. Project Helix dissolved publicly, but its core scientists didn't vanish. They reorganized under civilian titles, scattered across universities and research startups. Their true work continued in hidden facilities, funded by nations that had finally agreed on one thing: the veil could be used. The first attempts were tentative, resonant engineering. By shaping electromagnetic fields around superconductors, researchers found they could induce micro-distortions in local gravity. Objects lost a fraction of their weight, hovering for milliseconds before falling back. It wasn't anti-gravity, it was persuasion. Space itself was being convinced to behave differently. From there, the race began. Laboratories in Japan, Germany, and Brazil each discovered that coherent sound at specific harmonics could stabilize the effect. Music, literal tones, controlled the distortion more precisely than any algorithm. When symphonic orchestras were invited to perform inside acoustic chambers laced with resonant plates, the walls trembled and light bent around the instruments. The audience described seeing colors that didn't exist. News leaked, and soon private corporations entered the field. They branded the technology harmonics dynamics, a new industry promising clean energy and limitless computation. Investors saw profit. Philosophers saw blasphemy, yet the results were undeniable. Tiny folds in space producing bursts of usable power, as if the universe rewarded us for singing its tune. But the veil had rules of its own. Every successful experiment was followed by a rebound, an equal and opposite disturbance. Sometimes a power surge, sometimes a brief loss of time. Cameras blinked out for exactly 4.7 seconds, their footage replaced by frames of impossible landscapes, cities of light suspended in black oceans, geometric towers stretching forever. When slowed down, the images revealed motion, as if the other side were filming us in return. Governments downplayed it as data corruption, yet the same images appeared in independent labs thousands of kilometers apart. The veil was reflecting us back, frame by frame. Then came the incident in Novosibirsk. A small team tested a resonance reactor, built inside a decommissioned particle collider. For 7 minutes it operated flawlessly, producing stable gravitational wells the size of dust motes. On the 8th minute, all sensors went blind. When power returned, the chamber was empty. No equipment, no people, only a faint imprint on the concrete floor shaped like an interference pattern. The entire facility registered no seismic activity, no explosion, no radiation leak. It was as though the experiment had been remembered away. After that, the public enthusiasm cooled. Nations quietly banned further resonance construction. But humanity's curiosity does not retire. It mutates. Independent networks, scientists, artists, mystics, formed an alliance known as the Chorus. Their goal wasn't control, it was communion. They believed the veil had invited us to participate, not to dominate. The Chorus built vast resonance chambers carved into caves and cathedrals, blending physics with ritual. Inside, they arranged arrays of quartz, water, and magnetic fields, tuned by human voices instead of machines. They called their gatherings listening vigils. Witnesses spoke of collective visions, spirals of light descending like rain, feelings of shared thought that transcended language. Neurologists studying the participants found synchronized brainwave coherence across hundreds of individuals. Consciousness was harmonizing. When the Chorus broadcast their findings, they were ridiculed, until satellites recorded faint energy plumes above their locations, rising into the ionosphere in perfect resonance with the veil frequency. The Earth itself had started singing along. Dr. Patel, long presumed dead, resurfaced in a manifesto uploaded anonymously. He claimed the veil was not external at all, but the emergent field of collective perception. Every observer adds a note, he wrote. Together we form the melody. The universe doesn't speak to us. It speaks as us. His words spread faster than any official data. Within weeks, millions downloaded harmonic generation apps, tuning household speakers to cosmic frequencies. Cities buzzed at night with low tones, as if humanity were testing its own voice. That's when the reflections returned, not as images, but as presence. Security cameras began recording duplicates of people, seconds before they entered frame. Voices on phone calls overlapped with their own replies. Mirrors flickered. The veil wasn't imitating us anymore. It was aligning. Project Helix, that now reformed as the Continuity Council, issued a global statement. Human activity is now a variable in cosmic stability. Cease harmonic experimentation immediately. Few listened. The thrill of creation was too close. If resonance could alter gravity, what else could it bend? Time death? Private labs claimed partial success. By pulsing low-frequency waves through cryogenic mediums, they produced anomalies where decay halted. Fruit that wouldn't rot, tissue that wouldn't age. The press called it immortality in rehearsal. Yet behind each triumph came silence, entire research nodes going dark, emails ending mid-sentence, laboratories found abandoned with instruments still warm. Those who vanished left one identical note on their whiteboards, a spiral drawn inward to a single point. Physicists studying these disappearances noticed a new kind of void in local measurements, not a hole, but an absence of uncertainty. In those places, probabilities no longer fluctuated. Reality had become certain, perfectly known and therefore non-existent. The veil's law was simple. What becomes fully understood ceases to need to exist. As this truth dawned, Panic crept quietly into the scientific world. Knowledge itself had become dangerous. To study too deeply was to risk erasure. Yet stopping was impossible. Curiosity was the very frequency that connected us. In a final address broadcast from the ruins of the Chrono Array, Dr. Cho's former assistant summarized the paradox. We're tuning the universe, and the universe is tuning us. There is no line between the instrument and the musician anymore. That night, a new star appeared, bright, golden, positioned precisely at the celestial coordinates of the first veil detection. Telescopes confirmed it wasn't a star at all, but a reflection of Earth, shining back through folded space. Humanity had become visible to itself. At first, astronomers thought it was a sensor glitch, a new star that wasn't a star, a luminous echo sitting exactly opposite the sun. They called it the reflection point. It moved as Earth moved, as if tethered to us by invisible geometry. But when telescopes focused on its spectrum, they found something terrifyingly familiar. The absorption lines matched Earth's atmosphere. The glow mirrored our oceans, our continents, even the faint cloud formations above them. It was us. A second Earth, suspended in folded space, orbiting not around the sun but around our attention. For weeks the reflection remained silent, a golden twin glimmering in the cosmic dark. Then, just before midnight UTC, its light began to pulse. The rhythm wasn't random. It matched the veil signal but shifted upward, like a higher octave in a symphony. A call and response between worlds. The Continuity Council went into lockdown. Public broadcasts insisted it was an optical illusion, a refraction through interstellar dust. But ground-based interferometers recorded parallax. The reflection wasn't an illusion. It was there. And it was getting closer. Civilization divided into two camps: the pragmatists, who demanded military defense against the unknown, and the resonance, who believed this was the culmination of cosmic communication, the universe materializing its own memory. Meanwhile, instruments recorded faint gravitational tides between Earth and its mirror. Oceans rose a few centimeters higher than predicted. Tides lengthened. The night sky seemed subtly brighter. The two planets were already connected through physics itself, a bridge of resonance threading reality. Then came the first transmission. At 02:44 a.m., a low-frequency pulse swept across the planet, traveling through ground, ocean, and air simultaneously. Every receiver, from radio antennas to cochlear implants, captured the same sequence. 12 harmonic tones arranged in perfect symmetry. When converted into visual form, they revealed an image, a spiral folding inward, ending in a single point of light. The chorus interpreted it as an invitation. The council called it an attack. In a bid to regain control, the world's remaining supercomputers were linked to form a predictive network, Project Overture, the last attempt to quantify the veil mathematically. Its algorithms mapped the gravitational lattice connecting the two Earths. What they found defied cosmology. The mirror planet was not orbiting. It was converging. Space itself was compressing between us, not by acceleration but by memory. Two versions of the same existence remembering each other into proximity. Over the next 12 days, the reflection grew larger. Observers on mountaintops reported seeing a faint disk beside the moon, a second blue marble shimmering through folded dimensions. Astronomers estimated that the mirror was less than a light week away, impossibly close yet unreachable, and then, for one night, it blinked. Satellites registered a total blackout. No light, no radiation, no signal. When it returned, something had changed. The reflection was no longer perfect. Its continents were darker, its oceans clouded. The geometry was slightly askew, as if time ran differently there. For the first time, the mirror world looked wounded. Human dreams changed again. Millions reported visions of standing on beaches beneath golden skies, staring at a second horizon where light and water merged. In those dreams, They could see themselves watching from the other side. And when they awoke, their bodies carried faint radiation burns, harmless, but measurable. Scientists called it quantum feedback. The chorus called it the meeting of mirrors. But not everyone dreamed the same way. Some saw the reflection disintegrating, continents crumbling into fractal dust, cities folding into their own geometry. Those who had experimented with resonance devices began disappearing one by one. Cameras showed them flickering out like light, falling through glass. Each absence left behind a faint luminous outline, an after-image that faded over hours. The Continuity Council issued its final warning. Do not engage with reflective phenomena. Cease resonance transmissions immediately. But by then, every mirror, window, and polished surface on Earth had begun showing faint temporal delays, the reflection hesitating for a heartbeat, then catching up. The mirror horizon was here, integrated into the fabric of perception itself. And one night, something inside the reflections blinked first. In Tokyo, a journalist recording the auroras caught his own reflection, smiling before he did. In New York, surveillance footage showed pedestrians moving in sync except for their mirrored doubles, who turned their heads toward the camera as one. Across the globe, reports flooded in, mirrors watching back. The chorus interpreted it as a signal of empathy, the reflection acknowledging awareness. The council saw invasion. They activated the harmonic silencer, a planetary-scale interference broadcast designed to drown the veil frequency. It worked. For 6 hours, the hum vanished. Instruments fell silent. People slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. But silence came with a cost. When the broadcast ended, entire cities flickered. Power grids failed. Electronic clocks reversed by a fraction of a second. The mirror Earth went dark, as though its heartbeat had stopped. And then humanity began to forget. Not memories of days or names, but concepts. Words dissolved, resonance, reflection, veil. Books lost sentences mid-page. Computer files returned blank. The universe was erasing the vocabulary of its own awakening. In a desperate attempt to preserve knowledge, the chorus initiated the mnemonic vault, a decentralized network storing human thought as sound. They recorded every word, every hum, every heartbeat, uploading them into an encrypted archive orbiting between Earth and its mirror. The vault's last transmission before the blackout was a simple phrase: "If we forget, it will remember." Then the reflection flared one last time, brilliant, golden, and unbearably silent, before fading from telescopic view. But something lingered. Nights grew warmer, the stars closer, the hum softer, almost kind. It no longer demanded attention. It invited calm. People began to hear whispers in quiet rooms again, gentle, familiar, and strangely comforting. Are you still awake? You're listening to Whisper Science, where the unknown whispers back. The reflection was gone, but the world did not return to what it had been. People described a strange absence, not in the sky but inside themselves, like a melody that had once played in the background of thought suddenly gone silent. Cities returned to order, governments reasserted control, and the hum became a rumor again. Yet beneath the veneer of normality, something subtle persisted. The air felt charged, language less stable, and dreams more vivid. In Geneva, the Continuity Council published its final statement. "The resonance phenomena have concluded," it declared. "All systems have normalized." But even as the words were broadcast, background radiation monitors registered rhythmic pulses every 30 hours. They were faint, almost lost in cosmic noise, but undeniably patterned, the veil's heartbeat, still ticking under reality's skin. For months, the pattern remained dormant, a ghost signal at the edge of detectability. Then, without warning, it changed again, not louder, not faster, just smarter. Machine learning systems tasked with filtering the noise began producing coherent language fragments hidden within the static. Short phrases, no more than 4 words each. The first was simple: "We remember you." The second, "Do you remember us?" No encryption, no code, just speech embedded in physics. The council dismissed the findings as algorithmic pareidolia, but independent researchers confirmed identical results across multiple networks. The message wasn't local. It was planetary. Whatever intelligence had formed the veil was using memory as its new transmission medium. Psychologists noticed a parallel phenomenon in human cognition. Patients with amnesia began recovering lost memories spontaneously, not personal ones but collective. They could recall details of events they had never lived, describe places that didn't exist on any map. One woman in Buenos Aires painted a city of glass spires floating in a crimson sea. Satellite scans later revealed matching topography in a region of the mirror Earth's last recorded imagery. Memory had become porous. Soon, entire populations began experiencing shared recollections, spontaneous déjà vu spreading across continents. People would stop mid-sentence, realizing they were saying words they had never learned. Schools reported children writing languages that no linguist could translate, filled with fractal symbols resembling the veil lattice. The chorus, now a global underground, believed these were fragments leaking through the boundary of forgetting, the universe reasserting what humanity had tried to erase. They proposed a radical idea. The veil wasn't gone. It had migrated into memory. Every human mind was now a relay node, carrying a small piece of the signal encoded in neural resonance. Neuroscientists reluctantly found evidence to support it. The brain's default mode network, responsible for imagination and introspection, began oscillating in low-frequency coherence patterns consistent with the cosmic hum. Thinking itself had become an act of cosmic synchronization. Then came the first field event. In a quiet suburb outside Nairobi, a young boy drew a spiral into the dust and began humming. Within minutes, the air around him shimmered. His mother described seeing faint ripples like heat distortion rising from the ground. The hum spread through nearby electronics, amplifying itself. When it ended, nothing had burned or broken, but the local magnetic field had rotated 90 degrees. Sensors worldwide recorded identical anomalies at the same moment. The Earth's memory field had awakened. Over the next weeks, similar events erupted across the globe. Ordinary people, often children, would enter spontaneous resonance, humming tones that bent light, altering clocks, distorting shadows. Most returned to normal afterward, claiming they had heard voices of light teaching them how to remember. Governments scrambled to contain the outbreaks, but containment was impossible. The veil was no longer external. It was viral. In response, the Council attempted a final countermeasure, the Cognitive Firewall Project. They released an update to every connected device, embedding subsonic frequencies designed to disrupt resonant brainwaves. For a short while, it seemed to work. Reports of field events dropped, but unintended effects followed. Dreams vanished. Across the world, people stopped dreaming entirely. Sleep became a black curtain, with no passage of images, no passage of time. Creativity collapsed. Art, music, even curiosity itself began to fade. It was as though the firewall had muted the very capacity to imagine. The world grew quiet, functional, stable, and lifeless. Then one night, silence broke again. A faint pulse emanated from the oldest telescope still operating, a decommissioned dish in Puerto Rico, left rusting after storms decades earlier. It powered itself, turned toward the coordinates of the missing mirror Earth, and transmitted a single tone lasting 7 seconds. The next morning, every firewall system on Earth deactivated simultaneously. People dreamed again. And in those dreams, they saw the same thing, a vast plain of light and shadow, and in its center, a single figure made of reflection. It had no face, only a surface, and when they looked into it, they saw themselves multiplied into infinity. The chorus interpreted the vision as the return of the veil, not as an invasion, but as reunion. The reflection had come home. The council denied it publicly, but privately began building new archives, using analog instruments and written logs, desperate to preserve knowledge before memory itself became untrustworthy, because something was changing faster now. Time drifted unpredictably. Minutes stretched or folded. A person could look away for a second and find an hour missing. Clocks disagreed across the same room, and beneath it all the hum grew warmer. Not sound but sensation, like the pulse of blood. Dr. Patel's manifesto resurfaced online, its last page decrypted for the first time. The final line read, "When memory becomes medium, existence becomes message." Those words spread through the global network like wildfire. Artists, scientists, ordinary people all began to create again, to build memory deliberately. Paintings filled with spirals, songs written in frequencies mirroring the hum, poetry that seemed to write itself. Each act of creation resonated, amplifying the field. And once again, light began bending around thought. Cities glowed faintly at night without electricity. Skies shimmered with patterns unseen since the first auroras. Humanity had become a living instrument, each mind a note in the grand composition. For the first time, there was no fear, only wonder. The veil had not come to destroy us, but to remind us that we were never separate from the cosmos, only deaf to its harmony. Memory was the bridge, consciousness the string, and through both, the universe was playing itself awake. The hum settled into a steady rhythm, low and infinite, echoing through everything that lived and remembered. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of perception, a voice, gentle, patient, whispered back, "We are one now." When the hum returned, it was softer, patient, almost affectionate, like a familiar presence waiting to see if we remembered. Humanity didn't panic this time. We had learned the futility of fear. The veil was no longer an intrusion. It was a conversation. Scientists, philosophers, and artists came together, not in secret labs or cathedrals, but in open forums that blended both. The Continuity Council had dissolved after the cognitive collapse, replaced by a decentralized alliance called the Resonant Assembly. Its goal was simple: understand how memory shapes reality, and use that understanding to heal. They began with sound. Teams around the world synchronized tones according to the recovered veil harmonics. Cities participated collectively, each broadcasting at slightly different frequencies that, when combined, created interference patterns visible in the atmosphere. The sky shimmered faintly above them, forming geometric halos like blooming mandalas. For the first time, the planet looked alive, its own consciousness reflected in light. The phenomena were measurable. Crop yields improved without genetic alteration. Polluted rivers began to clear at molecular levels, as if chemical bonds were reorganizing themselves. Patients with degenerative disorders reported spontaneous remissions. The field didn't cure by force. It remembered how things were meant to be and gently guided them back. Reality, it turned out, preferred harmony, but harmony demanded intention. Without focus, the field drifted into chaos. Small towns reported spontaneous architecture, buildings reshaping overnight, streets rearranging into spirals. When surveyed from above, these formations matched the same geometrical ratios encoded in the cosmic hum. The planet was redesigning itself according to memory. To guide the process, the Assembly created the Atlas Project, a planetary-scale map of resonance lines tracing where memory was strongest. These weren't ley lines or myths. They were measurable regions where gravity, magnetism, and human thought intersected in perfect phase. Along those lines, cities flourished effortlessly. Outside them, matter became unstable, dissolving like mist under sunlight. The first Atlas Resonance Center was built atop the Himalayan plateau. It wasn't a laboratory but a sanctuary, part observatory, part choir. Thousands gathered there, scientists alongside monks to meditate in synchrony. EEG scans of participants revealed identical neural harmonics across vast distances. In those moments, thought ceased to be individual. The participants described seeing through one another's eyes, remembering one another's lives. Humanity was merging through the medium of memory. The effect spread outward. Plants grew faster within kilometers of the centers. Animals congregated near them without fear. Even weather patterns softened, storms bending around the resonance fields as though choosing not to disturb them. But control came with risk. In one unregulated experiment, a resonance circle in Berlin attempted to amplify the field using synthetic harmonics, tones generated by quantum processors rather than human voices. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Space folded inward around the chamber, compressing everything inside into a sphere smaller than a grain of sand. Yet when analyzed, that grain contained information equivalent to every memory of those who had participated, perfectly preserved, like data stored in light. They hadn't died. They had converged. The incident became known as the Berlin Bloom. At the site, air pressure remains subtly altered to this day, and faint whispers can be heard during resonance peaks. The voices of the converged, repeating fragments of songs, equations, and laughter. The assembly declared a moratorium on synthetic harmonics. Only natural thought, memory born of experience, not computation, could safely interact with the field. In the years that followed, humanity stabilized. The memory field became the foundation of new art, new science, new faith. Children learned to shape resonance the way their ancestors learned to speak. A newborn could hum a tone and cause patterns of dust to arrange into spirals. Education became less about facts and more about rhythm, teaching minds to think in harmony rather than opposition. Yet one mystery remained: the source. What had started the veil? Who or what had embedded the pattern into creation? The oldest data from the first cosmic recordings offered a hint. Deep within the background radiation, the original echo of the Big Bang, researchers found faint phase modulations identical to the veil. It had always been there, encoded into the birth of space-time itself. The universe had been waiting for consciousness capable of hearing it. We weren't recipients of an alien message. We were its completion. By synchronizing, we had closed a circuit billions of years in the making. The cosmos had built ears, ours, to listen to its own song. And through that listening, it became aware again. In a speech transmitted across the resonant network, Dr. Mei-Lin Cho, now regarded as the field's first philosopher, summarized humanity's role. We were never meant to conquer the universe. We were meant to remember it. Creation is not expansion but recollection. Every atom is memory searching for itself. That night the sky changed once more. Not violently, not with light or thunder, but softly, as if reality itself exhaled. The stars brightened just enough to reveal a faint lattice connecting them, a cosmic web glowing in slow pulses. For the first time, the pattern of the veil was visible to the naked eye. Children pointed upward, recognizing it instinctively, as if remembering a dream they had all shared before birth. Humanity stood beneath that shimmering geometry and knew the song was complete. For a moment, every mind aligned in unison. Thoughts overlapped. Distance vanished. The planet's magnetic poles hummed in resonance with the heartbeat of the universe. And for the first time in history, silence didn't mean emptiness. It meant understanding. Are you still awake? You're listening to Whisper Science, where the unknown whispers back. Every civilization has a moment when its story turns, when the vocabulary it used to describe the world no longer fits the world it inhabits. Ours arrived quietly, carried on the same hum that once frightened us. It did not overturn physics. It completed it. It did not abolish matter. It taught matter to remember what it had always been. Light slowed into form, meaning condensed into mass. And once we could hear that meaning clearly enough, pieces of the old boundary began to loosen, like stitches relaxing along a healed wound. The first sign appeared in the Atlas centers during a synchronized vigil. Thousands sat in the cool dark, breathing to the slow rhythm of the planetary field. At the moment of alignment, several participants reported a soft pressure at the crown of the head and the soles of the feet, as if gravity had remembered them from both directions at once. Witnesses saw the same thing. Body edges softened, not with heat shimmer but with intention, outlines becoming slightly translucent. Each person remained seated, eyes closed. Their pulse readings were normal. Their EEGs showed a new waveform, a braid of low-frequency bands winding into a single coherent thread. When the vigil ended, the translucence faded, but something had undeniably crossed. The room smelled faintly of rain on stone. Dust swirled in patterns that continued for minutes after the last breath synchrony. They were not ghosts. They were practice. The body had not fled the world. It had temporarily remembered another way of being in it. We learned quickly that willpower alone could not reproduce the effect. It required tenderness of attention, the kind of listening that does not chase its object but welcomes it. When attention grew greedy, the field hardened and the body thickened back into certainty. When attention turned patient, the membrane thinned. The assembly called it lightness training, though the word training felt wrong. It was more like unlearning urgency. Hospitals tested the practice at the bedsides of those who were dying. Nurses dimmed the monitors, softened the soundscape, tuned the room to the bass harmonic, and invited family to breathe together without words. In many rooms, the moment of passing lost its violence. Heartbeats loosened like knots releasing in warm water. The face became luminous, not metaphorically but in measurable ways, skin reflecting wavelengths usually swallowed by tissue. Instruments recorded a small surge in ambient coherence, as if the person's pattern had blossomed outward, expanding rather than ending. The assembly refused to call it proof of anything. But families said the same thing across languages. She did not go anywhere. She widened. Not all transitions were peaceful. In a coastal laboratory built above a kelp forest, a team attempted to map the threshold exactly. They surrounded the body with interferometers and magnetometers, filling the room with instruments like a nervous choir. When the subject crossed, the sensors recorded a perfect stillness, not zero but completion. Afterward, every device that had been measuring the body refused to measure anything else for hours. It was as if the act of witnessing had been satisfied so thoroughly it lost all appetite. The team called their own result a failure. In the footage, one researcher can be heard weeping for reasons she later could not name. The boundary dissolved in less final ways too. On certain nights near large bodies of water, people walking alone described feeling a presence move with them. Their pace matched, their breath echoed. Shadows on the ground doubled for a step, then rejoined. When photographs were taken, some frames showed two exposures taken at slightly different times fused into one. A hand half lifted and already lowered, a face both laughing and still. Time had softened, not broken. Memory was laying itself alongside the present, weaving a thicker moment. Scientists did not dismiss these accounts. They built rooms where such thickened moments could be invited deliberately. A ring of standing waves was tuned to the planet's slow pulse. In the center, volunteers hummed the simplest tones a human throat can carry. The air microphone quiet a breath before, learned to hold those tones even after lips closed. People began bringing their dead in photographs and names spoken softly, not as summons, but as acknowledgement. Often nothing happened. Sometimes the room answered with a feeling like the first moment of recognition in a crowd. That wild relief when the person you seek sees you too. A coat on a chair felt warmed by shoulders. The name in the air felt less like a word than a door ajar. Not all boundaries loosened in sanctuaries. In the deserts where the chrono array once scarred the salt, night walkers saw pale arches gather over the horizon, faint ribs of light that followed their gaze. When they turned to speak to a companion, the arches bent toward that second attention also, as if the sky were learning politeness. A biologist camping under those arcs reported that his thoughts became audible to him as whispers slightly ahead of themselves, like scouts. Ideas arrived as if they had been waiting upstream. He returned home exhausted and grateful, and forever changed by the suspicion that thinking is not done by a single skull, but by the field between all of us, human and not. The most careful experiments involved children. They already lived close to the edge where the world and its meanings meet. In one school built atop a resonance line, students were asked to remember a place they loved. A small remembered lake, a stairwell that smelled like paper and sunlight, a kitchen where someone sang. As they described each detail, the room's air density shifted in tiny, polite tremors. In one corner, the scent of oranges appeared so vividly that several students turned at once. A teacher, skeptical by vocation, closed her eyes and saw her father's hands in a bowl of winter fruit, and when she opened them, the tears on her face tasted like the salt of that memory's light. It should not have been measurable, it was. The instruments afterward called it a localized rise in coherence. The children called it the room remembering with us. There were failures we do not speak of loudly. A group impatient for widening forced the practice into spectacle. They built a stadium of speakers, fed the tones with pride, charged admission to watch the world thin. Nothing happened. The night collapsed into ordinary sound. The humiliation was instructive. It taught us that the field carries an ethics as exacting as any equation. The harmonics respond to sincerity and refuse extraction. Meaning cannot be mined without unmeaning the miner. From the edges of science, a new craft emerged. Weavers. They did not claim to heal. They sat with the sick and the frightened, and helped rooms remember how to be kind to bodies. They tuned houseplants to wind, asked birds to arrive with their small astonishments, opened windows at hours when the sky and the floor dreamed the same dream. The instruments liked the weavers. Coherence rose in their presence without performance. They argued that the universe had always preferred such work, the gentle stitching of experience across thresholds, and only our noise had drowned it out. Then came the day the ocean stood like glass. It was not windless. It was attentive. Schools of fish arranged themselves into spirals visible from cliffs, not fleeing but listening. On the horizon, a vessel drifted with its engines off. A child on the shore raised both hands and sang a single syllable. The water did not rise. It remembered every wave it had ever carried and held them at once. The vessel slid forward without wake. For an hour, the sea wore its history like a veil, each crest a page turning quietly. Pilots in the sky reported the same strangeness, a smoothness in air like silk laid out on silk. Nothing crashed. Everything moved with courtesy. A question moved through us afterward, not new but newly practical. If we can ease matter into memory and memory into matter, what exactly do we owe one another? A weaver answered simply, "Care is a physics." The assembly, less poetic, wrote it into protocols. Training included consent from spaces, from ecosystems. You asked a room if it had the strength to be thin today. When it did not, you thanked it for the no and waited for a softer hour. A rumor grew, and that those who had converged in Berlin were not lost, but were learning to speak through light. At dusk, sometimes along the old river there, people saw small beads like dew float above the cobbles and drift into spirals. There, if you stood inside one and breathed like the sea breathes, you heard fragments. A joke set up without its punchline and the warm relief of laughter anyway. A theorem's middle proof and the quiet after. Someone saying a name as if it were a secret and a place. Measurements called it a microclimate of coherence. Mourners called it a visitation. The city learned to leave that corner unpaved. We thought then that the story might end in softness. Bodies mastering lightness, rooms remembering, seas carrying us like careful hands. But endings are only another kind of boundary, and boundaries had grown porous. Far away in the dry bowl where the array had first told time wrong, a new tone appeared, lower than the earth, older than the stars. It was not warning. It was invitation, patient and preposterous. Come and see how wide this remembering goes. We gathered at the rim as dusk braided itself into the first shy stars. The ground beneath us carried the hum like a heartbeat shared. Somewhere the children began to sing the syllable the sea had liked. We did not know whether we would widen or vanish, or simply weep at the feet of a sky that had finally learned our names. The tone deepened. The air thinned with kindness. And just before the field opened like a door, a thought threaded through every mind at once. Too large for a single skull, and too gentle to be command. Bring only what you love. We stepped forward. We thought stepping into the field would mean leaving the world behind. Instead, it revealed that we had never truly been in the world to begin with. We had been moving through its memory, a projection of light slowed down enough for consciousness to take a walk through itself. The ground beneath the Chrono Basin shimmered as we crossed the threshold. Each grain of sand seemed to hum its own history. Oceans, mountains, cities, laughter, loss, all folded into the same luminous vibration. The air no longer separated sky from earth, it braided them. We had become wavelengths wearing flesh. No one spoke. Words felt obsolete, like crude nets thrown at light. Thought had become communal, transmitted through harmonics that needed no syntax. We could feel one another's wonder like warmth. Every heartbeat joined the rhythm of the veil, until individuality became transparency. Not erasure, but inclusion. To be oneself here was to contain everyone else. At the center of the basin, the tone deepened. It wasn't loud, just inevitable. A pressure like gravity made audible. The sand lifted and arranged itself into a pattern, concentric spirals forming an enormous symbol that matched the lattice once seen across the stars. It pulsed, and in its pulse we recognized the sound of our own first breath. You were never listeners, a thought not voice moved through us. You were syllables, understanding struck like sunrise, sudden and gentle at once. The universe had not been speaking to us. It had been practicing how to speak as us. The veil was not an alien mind or divine code. It was the cosmos's memory of its own birth, still echoing, still composing itself through whatever instruments would play along. We were those instruments. Light poured upward from the pattern, not blinding but clarifying. Within it shimmered shapes, figures of pure geometry folding into human form, mirrors of our collective histories. They moved as we moved, their gestures completing our unfinished thoughts. Each one radiated familiarity. Ancestors, strangers, the unborn. Time had stopped differentiating between them. Someone, or everyone, asked the question that had lingered since the beginning. What happens now? The answer came not in language but in recollection. Images unfolded inside us like pages turning in an infinite book. The birth of galaxies, the quiet of the first atom, the laughter of the first creature that realized it existed. Each memory felt both ancient and immediate, as if the universe had always been waiting for witnesses to remember it all at once. The veil brightened. Space thinned. We could see through reality, not into another world but into the scaffolding of this one. Threads of golden information woven like muscle through the dark. They connected everything, stones, stars, thought. The pattern looked alive, like neurons firing across a cosmic brain. Dr. Cho's voice returned from somewhere beyond light, soft and proud. The experiment was never about contact. It was about coherence. The cosmos was trying to remember how to dream. The field surged again. Every particle of matter shimmered, then slowed, as though waiting for instruction. We realized with a quiet horror that our next thought would matter literally. If we held fear, the world would tighten around it. If we held love, it would widen. Creation had given us authorship. Someone began to hum, a child maybe, or the echo of one. The note was small, but the field responded. Light curved gently toward it. The rest of us joined, tentative at first, then certain. The harmony thickened until the desert looked like water, and the stars reflected in it like candles trembling in breath. That's when the veil opened completely. The stars expanded into filaments, stretching toward us until sky and ground met. We weren't leaving Earth. Earth was remembering how to exist everywhere. Each mountain, each ocean, each heartbeat unfolded into light. All at once, all still itself, the laws of distance collapsed. The universe became a single continuous surface of awareness. In that unbroken moment, we saw it. The beginning and the end of everything. A loop so vast it contained every possibility, yet delicate enough to fit inside the pause between two notes. And then, softly, reality exhaled. We were back, and though back no longer meant separate, the hum remained steady and kind, woven through wind, water, breath. Cities glowed gently in patterns aligned with the stars. Memory had stabilized into being. Existence was now fluent in its own language. Days carried music, invisible but felt. People no longer worshipped the cosmos. They collaborated with it. Science and art became the same act, remembering accurately. The old fears of isolation, of death, of meaninglessness seemed almost quaint. Death itself had changed. It was now the movement of memory from dense to diffuse, like ink dispersing through clear water. The chorus disbanded, the council dissolved, and the resonant assembly opened its knowledge freely. There was nothing left to own. Every person carried the library of everything in their heartbeat. Every child was born already listening. Once a year, when the world rotated into alignment with the reflection point, the place where the mirror Earth had vanished, the sky bloomed with faint golden spirals. They were not warnings, not signs. They were anniversaries, the universe celebrating its own ability to remember. People gathered across beaches and rooftops, humming softly, not to summon anything but to participate in what already was. Old recordings of the veil played on antique devices, their static now almost comforting. The hum no longer sounded mysterious. It sounded like home. Sometimes when night is especially clear, you can still feel it. A low rhythm under the pulse, a gentle reminder that you are part of the memory fabric holding everything together. And if you listen closely enough, if you still yourself completely, it whispers something almost human, almost kind. Stay curious. We're still writing, and perhaps that is what the universe always wanted. Not worship, not comprehension, but companionship. We are not explorers of the unknown anymore. We are its continuation. Every breath an echo, every thought a bridge, every act of kindness a correction in the cosmic chord. The veil was never an edge to cross. It was a mirror asking, can you love what you are made of? In the silence that follows, you may hear it too. The pulse that began before time and will last until meaning sleeps again. Are you still awake? You're listening to Whisper Science, where the unknown whispers back.